Happy Friday, everybody. James Hancock here. I'm back to review Jordan Peele's new horror movie, Us. Jordan Peele's career has never been in a stronger place than at this precise moment, with an Oscar under his belt for Get Out, as well as his upcoming gig as the host of the new Twilight Zone starting April 1st. His career is just absolutely on fire right now, and I love how he's using that success to make horror movies, and I do want to emphasize the word horror. There's a new loathsome trend where so many people seem embarrassed to use the word horror and prefer instead to describe films as art house horror or elevated horror, almost like they're ashamed to be talking about what has always been one of the most beloved genres of storytelling ever since the dawn of mankind. As long as people continue to tell stories around a campfire, or write books, or shoot movies, or design video games, there will always be people who are obsessed with the genre of horror, and there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for any of these creators or fans to hang their heads in shame about it. Now, I should say in advance that Us is the kind of movie with a lot of major twists that could very easily be spoiled, so I will be talking about the film in very general terms initially, and I'll give you fair warning before going into any major details. But in broad strokes, the story follows the trials and tribulations of a family over the course of a single evening of murder and mayhem when their vacation home is suddenly invaded by bloodthirsty doppelgangers. It's quite a ride, and it should serve as a relief to fans of Jordan Peele who worried that he might face a sophomore slump with his second film as writer and director. But what I want to emphasize first is that Us is definitely a movie you want to see in a packed theater. 99 times out of 100, I loathe and despise my fellow moviegoers for being on their phones or talking throughout the movie or strolling in 10 minutes late and getting lost looking for their seat. And last night was no exception. My screening room near Union Square was packed with people guilty of all the above, but I would not have had it any other way. Because with every thrill, every comedic beat, every act of violence, my unruly theater completely and utterly freaked out. There were at least 3 or 4 groups of people who seemed to be having a competition over who could be the most obnoxious whenever the tension and suspense of the movie became too overwhelming. Now, I should admit up front that I did not find the movie to be scary at all. Gory, yes. Violent, absolutely. Hysterical, 100%. But I never for a second felt a single emotion even remotely resembling fear, dread, or anxiety. So listening to this crowd have a complete total meltdown, in a way it kind of allowed me to vicariously experience the terror that the movie was failing to provide to me specifically. But let me emphasize, this movie is a big, gigantic crowd pleaser, and I'm sure it's going to make vast sums of money. What's interesting is seeing how Jordan Peele has almost completely pivoted away from the social issues he explored in his last film, Get Out. I'm sure there'll be some people who might be disappointed by this creative choice on his part, but it seems as if Peele with this movie, he set out to make a big, giant roller coaster of a movie with a very small dash of social commentary, just so that the critics who are completely in his corner wouldn't be deprived of the chance to take themselves too seriously while discussing the movie. What surprised me was how much I enjoyed the movie before the action officially gets underway. My favorite part of the movie by far is the first 30 minutes or so, as the family's settling into their vacation home in Santa Cruz, an environment that has this terrible secret that's hinted at only vaguely to keep us on our toes. Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke are absolutely phenomenal, but their kids, played by Evan Alex and Shahadi Wright-Joseph, are great as well. They have this incredibly intimate and lovable sense of chemistry, and I just found myself smiling and giggling almost nonstop, watching them bicker and talk trash as they debate how to spend their time once they arrive at this beach resort. And if you've seen the trailer, you know that all these actors have to do double duty as their doppelgangers, and for the most part, they nail it. In particular, the kids who seem to be having an absolute blast playing their violent counterparts. My favorite moment in the entire movie is when Shahadi Wright-Joseph's character, Zora, she's sprinting away from the house in terror, and her counterpart casually follows her out to the street, gives herself like a quick stretch, and then just hauls ass after her. But then Zora has a great moment herself later in the movie after committing a ruthless act of violence, and we see her kind of shaking out her arm in anticipation of the next battle, almost like she's suddenly discovered her true calling. What's interesting though is how the humor in this movie is a bit of a double-edged sword. There's so many great comedic beats scattered throughout the movie that I found it utterly impossible to be worried or tense at any point in the film. My fellow moviegoers clearly needed that relief, and they'd exhale audibly whenever something funny would happen because it would allow them to let off a little steam. But I wouldn't have minded personally if the film had tried to be a little more disturbing and a little less entertaining. This isn't exactly a criticism because I was never bored, not for a single second, but I feel like there's a much darker film that could have been made with a few minor tweaks. So I can't go any further without giving away a massive chunk of the movie, so if you don't want spoilers, bail out now, last warning. But for me, the part of the movie that will excite the most debate is the part that actually interested me the least, namely the final act of the movie, where the film suddenly leans hard into a sci-fi scenario that I don't think quite works, or at least it's not as effective as the earlier sections of the movie. The opening title screen, which tells us about these mysterious tunnels beneath America, didn't quite ignite my curiosity, and I'm not entirely convinced that this parallel world of clones beneath the streets of America won't start to feel a little ridiculous upon multiple viewings. On one hand, horror and mystery can very easily be spoiled by providing too much information, but as it stands, I was just kind of bewildered by this idea of this vast network of clones tethered to their counterparts on the surface. As it turns out, their ultimate goal is to kill their counterparts and then lock hands in a line across the country like the Hands Across America event from 1986. So was that always their goal, or were they simply inspired by the t-shirt worn by Lupita Nyong'o's character Adelaide as a young girl? Also, are we to assume that there are similar experiments going on beneath every city in America? I doubt there are enough folks in Santa Cruz alone to make this line work. But have they all just been sitting around for decades, waiting for the day where Adelaide might return to Santa Cruz with her family in order to suddenly launch this attack? The more I talk about it out loud, the more ridiculous the overall concept seems. So I'll simply say I could have used a little more exposition on this front, but this part of the movie had so little impact on me that I honestly don't care to learn more. The parts of the movie that really work for me are the interactions between the family. The actors are so dialed into their roles that I could just watch them hang out even without all the gore and the killings. That said, one of the funniest beats the entire movie was watching the family bicker in the car as they argue about their current kill count. That scene absolutely had me howling. So overall, I had an absolute blast with this movie, but I'll be interested to hear what other people think about the final third, and I'll probably need to give it another go before I completely resolve my conflicted feelings toward the more outlandish elements of the plot. My hope is that Jordan Peele continues to work with horror and science fiction, because those genres are always in desperate need of dynamic voices to take the genres to new places. So I think that's about all I have to say on this particular movie, but as I said at the beginning of the video, definitely go see it in a big, wild, unruly theater filled with pack maniacs. It'll definitely improve the experience. But if you enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to talk more about horror or Jordan Peele or whatever, you can find me on Twitter at Colbrex. There's a link in the description below. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, and I'll be back at you in the near future. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.